Okay, year six. So 3 chapters to get through in this session today. Only short ones, so it's not going to hopefully take us too long. So chapter 31, tornado touchdown time. Hopefully you read chapter 30 on your own yesterday. It was only 4 pages, so make sure if you haven't, you go back to yesterday's guided reading, or actually it wasn't yesterday, was it? It was this morning. This morning's guided reading session, and just catch up on that last 4 pages of chapter 30. It's really important before we read into this. Okay, so somehow Kat found her way back to the tube. She stomped up the high street with me, trying to keep up, my hand flapping, and then actually asked directions from a man who was painting a railing, and he pointed a finger and she stomped on, acting as if I wasn't there. And I kept up with her until we got to the tube. We travelled a long way home in silence. Then we walked back up the main road into our street, and she still said nothing, but she let me walk beside her now, and her lips were turned down, which meant she was more sad than angry. Outside a house she stopped and said, "We're for it, Ted. Our hair isn't even wet." I touched my hair, confused. Then I remembered. We were supposed to have gone swimming. "Maybe we can just sneak in," Kat whispered. She got out her key and was about to put it in the lock when the door flew open. Mum stood in front of us, barring the way. Her hair was messy and her eyes were as wide as volcano craters. She dangled our swimming gear before our eyes. Kat's bikini, 2 sets of goggles, my trunks. She sputtered, dropped the lot, hugged us, cuffed Kat round the ear and screeched, "You disobedient, lying, cheeky, and as for you, Ted, I'm shocked. I don't know what's got into you. Writing that lie about going swimming? I've been worried witless. Kat walked past her with her hands over her ears. "Don't you swan off like that until I finish with you." I hovered in the doorway, frowning and thinking of swans gliding away in the pond in the park. Then I mumbled, sorry, Mum, because I knew she was angry, but she didn't hear me. I picked up the things she'd dropped. She yanked me into the house and slammed the door. "That Mrs. Hopper across the road's peering out again. God only knows what the neighbour think. TV crews, police cars, I've just about had it. Gloria's gone mental. You two vanish. Haven't you any idea how I've been feeling?" Kat laughed. She kicked the skirting board and hooted. "The neighbours," she screeched. She doubled over. "Typical grown-up crap." Her voice went up an octave and she crooned, "God only knows what the neighbours think." "Is that all you care about, Mum? What the neighbours think? We've been trying to help, trying to find Salim, but you're not interested, are you? You don't want to know what we think, do you? All you care about is what the neighbours think. Salim might be dead for all you care." Mum stood eyeball to eyeball with Kat. I realised they were exactly the same height. "Don't you dare say that. Don't you dare." Mum's hand darted up as if to hit Kat hard on the cheek, but it froze about a centimetre off the target. Her voice trailed off. The temperature in the hallway seemed to plummet to -30 degrees. Kat stared at Mum, her eyes round. "Go on, hit me," she hissed. Mum shook her head, and I could see tears falling down her cheek. Her hand fell to her side. I stepped forward. "Mum, Kat," I said, but they paid no attention. Then Kat's lips started to wobble. She pushed Mum out of her way, wailing, "I hate you! I hate you!" She ran upstairs, tripping halfway. "Hate you! Hate you!" A bedroom door slammed. Then something upstairs crashed. It was like tornado touchdown time, or T times 3 in our house. This is a way of my way of describing what it's like when people have really bad arguments, and it's the worst place to be in all the world. Mum slumped on the on the bottom stair, head down in her hands. Her shoulders heaved and she made a strange noise. I'd never seen Mum like that before. "Oh no," she moaned, rocking herself. "Is there no end to this?" I wasn't sure whom she was talking to, and looked around. I was the only one there, which meant she was either talking to me or God. Oh God," she said. So it was God, not me, and I was free to go. I decided to check out the weather in the back garden. 32. Solar wind. I walked fast through the kitchen and out to the back garden, my hand flapping. The general synopsis of 1800 issued by the Met Office. Fitzroy mainly northerly, 4 or 5 becoming variable, thundery showers. I did my pacing, counting the strides it took to get from one side of the back garden to the other. 12.5 strides long, 7 across. I ducked under the line of dry clothes, grabbing onto a sheet. I left my grubby stain. My fingers were still black from going through the phone book earlier. Eye of the needle solutions. That's what I needed. A solution for the impossible. How you get through a needle point. How you disappear from a seal pod. I thought of the girl on the motorbike, the pink sleeve in the photo. I thought of Dad's razor blade. I thought of the strange men and the man and the lady saying how he was fired, and him saying we should find the bird with the dark hair. And I thought of what Aunt Gloria had said earlier. If brains alone could bring Salim back, yours would do it, Ted. I held my hands over my ears and shook out my head. My brain felt like it was overheated, going into meltdown. I paced the garden and recounted my steps. Only this time the number came out wrong. 11.5 strides instead of 12.5. So either my legs had grown in the last few minutes, or the universe had shrunk, instead of expanded. Oh, I went, like the Earl Court motorbikes. I looked up at the sky. Evening, high strata cloud, fresh southwesterly, but air pressure falling. One of Dad's shirts on the line flapped against my head. The wind was picking up. I walked over to the garden shed and kicked it a few times. I'm not a philosopher, I'm a meteorologist, but I believe in meditation. Buddhists believe that if you empty your head, that's when you find enlightenment. Kicking the shed is a good way of emptying your head. It's like jumping on a trampoline. You kick or jump, you jump or kick, and eventually all the thoughts march out of your ears, like a line of toy soldiers heading for the edge of the table. You're left with nothing. The empty nothing I told Salim about, which is frightening and lonely, but simple and clear. I shut my eyes and imagined a vast, silent void. I kept up the kicking. By the 87th kick, I was empty inside, and a kind of solar wind arrived in my brain. A storm of charged particles rushed through my head like lightning, giving off strange flashes of coloured lights. A picture formed. It was like the aurora borealis burning in my brain. It sparkled so hard it hurt. The pattern I'd half glimpsed earlier that day flooded back, but this time it didn't vanish. I caught it. I hung onto it. I made it freeze like ice. Then I knew. Not where Salim was, but how he'd vanished, like he had. Okay, so we are going to read on. We are going to read the next chapter, but before we go to there, have a think. What has he just thought of? What are your ideas? What are your predictions at this point? 33. The sound of the storm. When you try to talk to people in the middle of a storm, they can't hear. They can't catch your words for the sound of the storm. Thunder, rain and wind. And the things the storm moves, leaves, roof tiles, rubbish. I came in from the garden, 87 kicks to the garden shed wider, but I couldn't make myself heard. Dad was just coming in from work. Mum was still sitting on the stairs. She ran to him before he took off his coat. Her arms went round him and she put her head on his shoulder. Oh, Ben, I'm so glad you're home. Faith, love, what's wrong? Has there been bad news? Not since we spoke earlier. The press has been here twice. Glo's been terrible all day. This afternoon she had a panic attack. She couldn't breathe. I called the doctor. I gave her a sleeping pill. She's upstairs, flat out. The first proper sleep she's had since Salim went missing. Then the kids just took them off somewhere without asking. Ted left a note about going swimming. Imagine. He lied, Ben. I didn't know what to do. I thought we'd lost them too. Then Rashid went out to walk the streets. He said he was going mad, sitting around, waiting. And just now the kids came back. Oh, Ben, the relief. They came in the door and Kat and I... Shh. We had a row. So what's new? A terrible row, Ben. I nearly hit her. I came this close. She held out her finger and thumb, a centimetre apart. Then she started wailing again. Dad said, shh, shh, shh. But she didn't stop. Stood a couple of metres away. Dad, I said. He didn't answer. Mum, I said. She didn't answer. I waited and tried again. Dad, Mum. Mum looked round and swallowed. She said, oh, Ted. There you are. Can't you go upstairs and read a book or something? But Mum, I've worked out... Shh, Ted, Dad said. Now isn't the time. The words were hard and short, not like Dad's voice at all, and Mum started crying again, so I went upstairs. In my room, Kat lay face down on the lilo, her fist clenched up and pressed between her eyebrows. I noticed that my alarm clock was on the floor, broken into bits. That was the smashing sound I'd heard earlier at the tornado touchdown time. Kat, I said. She shook her head, eyes scrunched up. A tear slipped out and trailed down her nose. She didn't wipe it away. Kat, I think I've got it, she moaned. The theories, the 9 theories. I think I know the right one. Oh, Ted, you and your theories. She grabbed a pillow and buried her head under it. I went up to her and tapped her shoulder. The theories, Kat, I said. She looked up from the pillow. Go away, she said. Kat, I said. And I added, sis, because she likes me call her this, and says it makes me sound normal. But this time it didn't work. Ted, I don't want to know. Go to hell. Kat? She took the pillow and banged me on the shoulder with it. That's to stop you looking like a bloody duck that's forgotten how to quack, she said. Then she threw herself down and sobbed. Next, I crept into Kat's room where Aunt Gloria was. Aunt Gloria, I whispered, but Aunt Gloria was fast asleep. This was not surprising, and Mum had said she'd had a sleeping pill. Sleeping pills make your brainwaves calm down into a sleep pattern. I would like to try one, not so much because I have trouble sleeping, but more to see if my brain, with its different operating system, would respond. Aunt Gloria lay on her back, diagonally across the bed, her foot hanging over the edge of the duvet. Her mouth was half open, her breathing loud and low. Her eyelids were a bruised colour, a purple smudge. I couldn't have woken her up even if I tried. I was about to creep out again when I saw Kat's copy of The Tempest face down on the duvet. Kat, like Salim, had been studying it at school. Had Aunt Gloria been reading it too? Salim said that he'd acted in it, and it was right up my street. I realised now that he'd meant that I would like it, because it was named after a dramatic weather condition, and weather is what interests me most. I picked it up, sat down at Kat's desk, and began to read. First there was a long list of people. This is how plays always start. The author tells you who is who, how they're related to each other, and it's called the cast of characters. This one had a lot of men and some strange sounding spirits, and a female called Miranda, who I remembered Kat saying was a dish rag. I then read the first scene. I didn't understand it because the language was almost as hard to understand as French, which is my worst subject at school. I read it again and a third time before I worked out it was about a ship sinking in a storm. That was as far as I got when a groan behind me made me look up. Salim? It sounded as if Aunt Gloria was speaking in her sleep. Salim? I crept over to the side of the bed, the Tempest open in my hand. No, Aunt Gloria, I said. It's Ted. She looked at me. The whites of her eyes were bloodshot, which is what happens when you've been crying or staring too hard for too long at something. Ted, she said. She saw the copy of The Tempest and smiled. I was reading that just now to help me sleep. Salim was in it last term. I know, Aunt Gloria. He told me. She smiled. The dashing young prince, Ferdinand, my Salim. She turned onto her side and curled up, crying. I stood there in silence, not sure if I should put my hand on her shoulder or do nothing. After a while, I realised she'd gone back to sleep. I put the play back down by her side and left the room. Out on the landing I stood and listened to the house. It was quiet. I wondered why nobody could hear me when it was so quiet. Then I started to hear the sounds houses always make when the people in them are silent. Boards creaking as they settle onto the foundations, pipes gurgling inside the walls, central heating humming. I clung to the banister at the top of the stairs. I heard something else, my heart thumping, blood pumping in my ears, a distant tick of the clock in the hallway downstairs. It was time. Time had a sound too. I'd never heard it before. I put my hands over my ears. It was deafening. Mum appeared at the bottom of the stairs. She came up silently and gave me a hug. I squirmed. Ted, she said. I apologise to you, but especially to Kat. Mum, I said, I've worked it out. She patted my head as if I'd said nothing, went past me and knocked on my bedroom door. There was no reply, but she turned the handle and went in. She shut the door behind her. I heard a voice, soft and sad, coming from the other side. Then I heard Kat's. I couldn't hear their words. I went on downstairs just as Rashid let himself in through the front door with a spare key. He stood in the hallway looking ahead with no expression on his face that I could decipher. Uncle Rashid, I said. Sorry, he said. Oh, hello, Ted. Dad came out of the living room and greeted him by saying, do you want a can of beer? And they went into the kitchen, just as if I didn't exist. Then I went into the front room. I went over to the mantelpiece and I picked up Detective Inspector Pierce's card. I stared at it. I'm no good at telephone conversations, but I remembered how she'd smiled at me when I told her about Salim getting a call on his mobile, and how she wished her officers had half my brains. She'd listened then. I normally only use the telephone about once a week. This is because I have nobody I need to telephone, but sometimes Mum makes me call the directory inquiries number as she says I need the practice. Today I was about to use the telephone twice, which was far more practice than I wanted. I sat on the side of the sofa on top of my flapping hand. I picked up the phone in my other hand, then I dialed Detective Inspector Pierce's number. Okay, we're going to leave it there. So, getting towards the end now, Ted thinks he's discovered it. Do you think he's right? Do you think that Detective Inspector Pierce is going to listen to him? Or do you think that this is just another dead end?